Hello, welcome back. In this Blender tutorial, we will be showing how to create a crystal material that we can apply to this mesh to create an enchanting glowing vibe using two materials, which we will merge together using the very handy Mix Shader node. We will be using a model from the Glowing Crystals project available for purchase and download from our site. The link to this download is in the description below. This project contains 4 original crystal designs with glowing materials, which are all made with internal procedural textures. Each mesh is low poly and usable in games and animations. Crystals can be changed to any color including white, and you can use this material on just about anything to give it a crystal type look. Let's get started. I've imported one of the crystal models from our site and have cleared all the materials and internal textures from the project. I have also deleted the default light that is created with the default scene. I've also hidden the camera for now so it doesn't get in our way. Assuming your units are set to meters, while in the viewport, press the N key to bring up the side menu here, and let's check out the dimensions of this crystal. It's quite large because the original intent was this to be a giant glowing crystal structure. The scale is irrelevant, but keep in mind that some of the settings you see in this video may need to be adjusted if your crystal is much larger or much smaller. I'm going to create a plane for this crystal to sit on. Shift A and select Mesh. And then Plane. Let's scale that up quite a bit. S key and drag. That should be fine. If you enjoy this video, please tap the like button and subscribe to our channel to get notified when new videos are posted. Select the crystal, and let's go up to the top of the screen here and click on the Shading tab. If nothing appears below in the shading editor, press the Home key on your keyboard to recenter all the nodes. Currently, the crystal is using the default material within Blender. I'm going to add a glass BSDF shader to the editor and swap it out with the default principled shader. Shift A. Select Shader, and then let's select Glass BSDF. We can delete the principled shader, and let's connect the glass out to the surface of our material. In order to see what this has done, we need to go into another viewport shading mode. I'll go up to the top right and select Render Display. Over in the Properties editor, if it's not already set, let's set the render properties, Render Engine, to Cycles. Alright, this looks a bit like a crystal structure, although very dark indeed. We'll add some light to the crystal in just a moment. Let's make the color of this glass a nice bright fuchsia. I'm going to bring up the roughness just a bit to about 0.35. What that does is make the crystal just a bit opaque and not completely transparent. Then I'll set the index of refraction, or IOR, to 1.6. I find that to be the sweet spot, but you can play around with the values we go over today to get your perfect crystal dialed in. Okay, next we are going to make the crystal glow and emit light. This is really pretty simple. Let's do a Shift A and type in emission, and then we will select it. And let's place this here. Drag the emission output to the volume input of the material, and just like that we have a glowing crystal. But we are not done. Let's fine-tune this a bit and add some more effects to it. Pump up the strength of the emission to about 5 or so. Nice. First, I'd like to have a nice gradation from a darker purple to a light pinkish color. We can do this with a gradient texture. Shift A. Start to type gradient, and then select Gradient Texture. This node doesn't know what colors we want, so we want to add a color ramp so we can play around with some options. Shift A. Type color. And color ramp comes up. Select it. Connect the color out of our gradient into the factor input of our ramp like so. Then the color out of the ramp into the color of the emission node. So far nothing seems to have changed. Let's add some color to the ramp. For this one to the right, I'd like to have a nice deep blue color. And this guy over to the left, let's select. And make it a nice bright deep purple. And maybe adjust this marker over a bit. Notice on the crystal, as I move this slider, which way the colors are changing. They appear to be going right to left at the moment. But I want from the bottom up. This is an easy fix. We'll need a mapping node and a texture coordinate node. Then we can have control over which way the gradation goes. Shift A, start typing mapping, and then select the vector mapping node. And place that here. Then Shift A, type in texture coordinate, and select, and place that to the left of the mapping node like so. On the texture coordinate node, grab the generated out and connect it to the vector input of the mapping node. Then the vector out into the vector in on the gradient. Drag the left color in the ramp back and forth. So far nothing has changed. In the mapping node, set the Y rotation to 90. Okay, now when we adjust the ramp, we can see the colors changing in the direction that I want. That looks good. Now is a good time to adjust the IOR on the glass shader if you want to dial in the look and feel. Slide this slider back and forth until you get something you feel good about. Somewhere in there looks decent. Same with the roughness setting, you can adjust this to give it a bit more crystal feel. Or more opaque. Alright. So we have a pretty decent looking glowing crystal, and we have control over its opacity, color, and how bright it is. If you look at a real crystal, or even stylized ones for reference, you notice many of them have worn edges where maybe it has been in contact with something, or the way the light refracts through the edges. We'll create a little effect to give the edges a bit of a worn look to make it a bit more crystal looking. To do this, we are going to duplicate the existing crystal mesh. I'll select the crystal, then Shift D and X to drag it over here just a bit. In the outliner, rename this to crystal_edge. While I'm here, I'll rename the imported mesh to crystal glow. With that new edge mesh selected, go down to the Materials Properties icon and make sure it's selected. In the Material Index area, click on the X button next to the Material field to unlink this material from this mesh. Next, click New to create a brand new material. Double-click the name, and let's name this Crystal Edges. Your shading editor should now look like this with a brand new principled shader and nothing else. To start, let's open up the emissions section on the shader and push the strength up a bit to maybe 1.3 for now. We can adjust this later. This just helps us see what we're doing in this dark environment. Okay, this is a quick little recipe for doing a subtle edge effect. In the shading editor, Shift A and type bevel and select. Put this here for now. Change the samples to 5 or so. Let's copy and paste this node to create a new bevel node. Place this one below the other one, and I'm going to keep the samples at 5, but change the radius to 0 like so. Now we are going to mix these together, so we have some control over what they do. Shift A, type and mix. And select Mix Color from the list. Place this in front of the two bevel nodes. Connect the normal out of the top node to the A color on the Mix Color. Then connect the normal out of the bottom node to the B color. And let's change the mode from Mix to Difference. And slide the factor up to 1. Let's see what this looks like so far. Connect the result out of what is now the difference node to the input on the base color of the shader. We can start to see some of the effect on the edges. Okay, let's disconnect from the base color for now. In order to get some control over the result, I'll add in a color ramp. Shift A, type in color. And then select color ramp. Place this in front of the difference node. Connect the result out into the factor input on the ramp. And let's see what that did. Connect the color output of the ramp into the base color. Looks pretty much the same, as expected. But now we have some control. Slide the white slider to the left and see what happens. Okay, we can see the edge effect starting to take shape. Nice. We can now play around with the color ramp to tweak the look we want. Disconnect the base color and drag the ramp color into the alpha. Okay. We can see that we now have a transparent crystal with edge effects. Let's do a quick render and see how it looks. I'll set my render quality to preview. And set my output size to something square like 960 by 960. Click on the camera icon in the viewport, and click on the lock beneath it to snap the camera to the view, and navigate to a good spot. Under the render menu, I'll click Render Image. Okay, I'm getting the effect that I want. But it looks a bit too perfect. Crystal edges are not perfectly smooth all the time. Sometimes they are a bit scraggly. Adding in some noise to the effect might help this a bit. I'll make some room in the editor here. And Shift A, start typing noise. And select Noise Texture. Then I'll grab another color ramp in order to have some control over the noise. Shift A. Color ramp. Connect the factor out of the noise into the factor input on the ramp. Attach the color out of the second color ramp to the alpha like this. Set the scale on the noise texture to something like 100. Okay, that looks like some noise. Disconnect the ramp from the alpha for now. We will use the noise texture as a mask to push our bevel effect through, which will give it a bit of a broken apart look. For this, we will use a mix color node. Shift A, type mix, and select mix color. Drop that right here. Connect the top ramp color out into the factor input on the mix node. Then the color out of the second ramp into the A color input, and make the B color black like so. And then reconnect the result of our mix into the alpha of our material. And then I'll drag the white color ramp slider over until I see something a little more pronounced. And drag the black slider to the right as well, so we see the noise better. Okay, that is really noisy. But the noise is showing everywhere. One last node and we are there. Shift A, and start typing invert. Select the invert color node. Place it between the top color ramp and the mix node like so. Alright, that's more like it. Now we can adjust the scale of the noise if we think this is not enough or too much. Let's pump that up to 200. Or even 400. And let's do a render. Adjust the settings to fit your needs, keeping in mind that the scale factor of your meshes may influence the settings that you need. Now let's combine these two materials together into a single material. With the crystal edge mesh still selected, click drag, select all of the nodes in the shader editor, including the principal BSDF material node. Hit Ctrl+C or copy. Then let's select the original glowing crystal mesh. And make sure the glowing crystal material is showing in the shading editor. I'll make some room above the nodes, and paste the nodes from the edge mesh here. And position them somewhere around here, so the three materials are sort of lined up. I'll do a Shift A. Type in shader, then select mix shader, and put that here. Connect the BSDF out from the principal material into the top shader input. Then connect the BSDF out from the glass material into the bottom shader input on the mix shader. Connect the result of this mix color node into the factor of the mix shader like so. We are not done just yet. Shift A. Type invert. Select invert color. And place that between the mix color and the mix shader to act like a mask. Alright. Finally, let's move the material node over here and connect the mix shader output into the surface input of the material like so. I'll zoom in a bit. Now we can go back to some settings and fine-tune this mask a bit to see the edge effect better. I'm just adjusting the white slider on the color ramp of the edge nodes. Okay. We now have control over the edge opacity, its size, and the level of noise. You can now apply this material to other meshes of similar size. Let's see what happens if we scale this down a bit. Notice the edge effect looks larger because it's being applied to a smaller mesh. You can adjust the scale of the edge width back over in our original bevel node by reducing the radius number here like this. And same with the emission strength. We can bump that up if we want to something like 10 to get that magical glow back on a smaller mesh. Okay. That does it for this tutorial. If you would like to purchase the Glowing Crystals project, you can do so at our online store. Links to our store are in the description below. I hope you got something out of this video. If so, please like and subscribe. Also, please leave a note in the comments with any questions or things I could have done differently. Check out other videos on my YouTube channel. Best wishes to you. Now go create.